Alright, let's go ahead and get started. This is the login screen for Code Yellow, and here I've already entered my username and now I have to enter my password. When you register, you can create your own username and password, or in particular cases your IT department can assign it for you for more security and control. Once you've logged in, you're taken to the Join Session screen. So if you're actually not here to create a session, you can go ahead and join an existing session, which they're listed up here. They have the game name, the scenario that's being played, who the host is, which will display the username, in my case WCAPS, current number of players logged in, the total number of players allowed, if the scenario is password protected. If it is, it'll have a check mark. You're going to already have to have the password in order to log in. And the game's status. In this case, Demo 2 has already started, and Demo 3 has just been initialized, meaning it hasn't actually officially started. So they're still on the login screens for all the players. If there's any sessions or notes for the game, they'll be down here once they're selected. In addition, down here, we can see what players have logged in. So you can see if your team is already logged in this case. And we also have a chat window, so you can chat with people that are still in this lobby screen. This is a standard chat window like you would use for IM or actually any in-game host session. So if you were to be playing StarCraft, you would see a very similar screen, or Command & Conquer or any other RTS games. We've tried to make all of our controls mimic game functions so that they are either fully mouse controllable with supporting keyboard controls, or excuse me, very similar to players that have played other games similar to RTSs, or even Candy Crush or Bejeweled or anything like that. So coming in, if they have any form of experience with computers, they probably already have experience with our user interface. So let's go ahead and create a session that we're going to play today. The scenario we're going to play is the Black Friday scenario, which is already selected. It's a dirty bomb incident. Actually, the storyline of the scenario is that a dirty bomb goes off in a shopping mall on Black Friday. So, largest shopping day of the year for the US. You're going to be dealing with blast damage and particulate radiation. Only the host knows this, by the way. The people joining don't actually know what the casualty incident is going to be. And something to point out, in this case, we are playing a scenario that is a mass casualty incident. Code Yellow supports any type of scenario, whether it be mass casualty or simply a day in the life of the hospital. As a matter of fact, our training incident, which is here, is merely a 30-minute introduction that can be played for as long as the player wishes to play. There is no incident. It is simply routine patients showing up, so it's a day in the life of the hospital. But we also have all the roles are available for this scenario, in the scenario notes. And in the scenario description, we have a short description of what's going on in the scenario. In this case, I'm going to name the scenario Demo 4. I don't need a password because no one else is going to be joining me, and I'm not worried about security for this demo. So I'm just going to leave this box checked, no. Otherwise, if I checked yes, I would have to enter the password I wanted and then submit it to my players. And as you note, even on the Create Game screen, you can still see what chats are going on, what players are logged in, and the notification window actually just gives you information about what's going on in the background of the program, nothing more. So now that all my information is filled out for the scenario selection, I'm going to go ahead and create the game. Once the game is created, we go to the Join Sim screen, or it's a lobby, where you're going to be waiting for the rest of the players to come in. They'll appear below you, not above you. So you, as the player, will always be at the top of the list. Here we have the player information, what roles they're going to be taking for the scenario, and whether or not they're ready. So, and up across at the top, we have the scenario name and the session name. So I'm going to go ahead and log in, and if you notice, player 1 was replaced by my name, and all of the roles are automatically selected. And I can go in and deselect the ones I want to not play for this particular scenario. But in this case, we're actually going to only leave MedSurg off. Oh, sorry. Actually, we're going to leave ED off. So this is intended as a multiplayer game, and multiple players can fill each role. So if there were 2 more players that came in, we could all play everything. We could all just play administration. We could play a variety of roles. So there's no limiting factor. So if someone else were to join, they would not only be able to play ED, they could play any of the roles I already have selected. In addition, we have an artificial intelligence that actually will play any role that is not occupied by a human. So in this case, artificial intelligence will control ED. For simplicity's sake and for accuracy of test data, the artificial intelligence plays perfectly. It will not throw the player a curveball. It will not misdiagnose. It will not mistreat. So it does everything correct. So later on during the stat phase, during the after action report, you can't blame the computer for doing something incorrectly. Something to point out about each of these roles is they are department heads. They are making decisions about things that are going on, and then staff is carrying out the decision. So while you may order something to be done, you'll have to wait for your staff to actually carry out the order. It's a good way to think about this through the entire thing. Actually, thinking about it, I'm going to let the AI control decon as well. And the reason for that, very simply, is decon and triage are very similar, so I'm just going to be showing triage, and MedSurg and ED are also very similar, so there's no real reason for me to show you both of them. User interface wise and game flow wise, they operate the same. Just so you know, everything is being done with a left click off of my mouse. Now once you've done this, you're going to signal that you're ready. And if you notice, before I signaled that I was ready, the Start Game button is actually not highlighted. And as soon as I signal that I am, it highlights. One more feature for this is, in addition to being a player, you can also be what we call a white cell or observer. And the way to do that is deselect everything. And then when you go in and join the game, you'll actually just observe everything. And in this case, the computer would play the scenario completely. But if there were other players taking roles, I could watch them do their job, but I actually can't interact with them at all. So now that we're ready to go, and in the case of a multiplayer situation, all players have to signal that they are ready. So let's get started. Takes a few minutes to load in. Here we go. Now we're going to see patients come in. One thing you can designate at the start of this during scenario creation is how occupied the hospital is. In this case, we already have patients in the emergency department waiting room. We also have patients in beds in emergency. And I'm going to explain how I know it's emergency as well when I go over the user interface very shortly. And this is down in MedSurg, which there aren't too many patients. Actually, there's nobody waiting down here. There we go. We have one patient down here. So let's go ahead and zoom out and I'll show you the hospital. This is a rather large hospital. So while we're zoning around, this happens to be medical surgery that we're looking at now. The blue colored floor up here is the emergency department. I notice that there's a brown floor color and a greenish teal floor color up here. So we have more emergency, and I haven't actually, the game does begin paused. I haven't unpaused the game yet, so that's why nobody's moving around. Then we have our cafeteria, our administration offices are up here. This is our OR surgical suites. This would be the admissions area instead of the emergency waiting area, which was up north, and then medical surgery again. One thing you can do when you play this game is we do have settings. And if I select medical surgery, notice, one, the camera moved just slightly, and it centered me on medical surgery. In addition, it has fogged out the emergency department. So by turning that on, you know where your assigned area of interest is. So you can very easily find where am I supposed to be. A, by clicking on your department, you'll be teleported there, or the camera will automatically move there. And B, the areas that are not within your area of responsibility will be fogged out. Another thing you can do is you can turn a department color on. And if you notice here that ED and Med-Surg have been very delineated. One has a tan floor coloring, the other has a brown floor coloring. In addition, there is a texture on the floor designating the different areas of the hospital. So there's a very dark texture on delayed care and a lighter texture or no texture at all on the ICU wards. And if you notice down here, there's exclamation points on my patients. That means that they are requiring my attention and I haven't looked at them yet. Patients that load into the scenario are actually being treated already, but further treatment may be necessary. So let's go ahead and turn that off. We'll go ahead and unpause. And while the hospital is starting to work, I'm going to go over the user interface. Up here in the upper left, we have our role buttons. They are 3 colors. The first of which is this dark blue color. That means that is available. If I click on it, I will assume that role. Then we have this lighter gray color, which means it is inactive currently, but can be activated and then it will become available to me. And finally, we have this dark gray color. In this case, the emergency department and decon. Those are unavailable to me at all for the entire scenario. I'm going to close down the settings window there. Up here, we have our clock in the upper right. And the clock measures the actual time of the scenario. I should mention that we operate under a compressed time. An hour of scenario time is roughly equivalent to 8 to 12 hours of real time. So we do that compression so A, you can get through the scenario or possibly multiple scenarios in a reasonable amount of time. And B, because in 1 hour you would not be making enough critical decisions, we feel. So everything is sped up slightly for you. Down in the lower right, we have a chat window again. Same thing, chat, notification, and news. And if you actually notice, going across the bottom here is our news ticker. The news ticker is actually programmed by the scenario designer. In this case, if you're reading some of them, these are actual headlines. What will happen later is headlines about the actual event will start scrolling across, and we put this news log in here so you can go back and say, oh hey, wait, there was an important bulletin that came through. Let me go back and check the news log. We'll also get alert messages that will fall in on the left side of the screen and sit at the bottom. Those are department specific. But because we're playing almost all of the departments, we're going to see a lot of them. They are patient updates. They are messages that come in across police band and emergency systems to tell us what's going on. The final part is the administration panel. This panel right here. It expands out and goes over 4 different areas. They are the token area, which is administrative abilities and global abilities. They are generally single-click actions that then have a broad effect. Administration worries about those more than anything else. Staffing, which I'm going to go into more of when I actually show you the staffing panel. This controls how your staff is distributed within your department, or it allows you to release staff up to the personnel player so he can redistribute it to other departments. Supply levels, which we deal with supply and external supply. And external supply is requesting supplies from other hospitals that exist in the world, or sending supplies potentially to other hospitals. And the patient list. This lists all of the patients in your department. It gives you their triage tag, their name, what status they are, healthy, expectant, minor, critical, their change, which we have a descending, if they are decreasing, if they're staying the same, or they're getting better. Their location, which if you hover on it, it will tell you where they are, and if they have any pending treatments or actions associated with them. We'll go into more of this when I go to the individual departments. So let's go ahead and get started. Actually, before I do that, I want to talk about controls. Everything I'm going to be doing today is going to be using the mouse. It is left click to select something, right click to move the map around. So you hold right click down and then scroll the mouse and the map will move. And the mouse wheel controls zoom. I'm going to try to stay zoomed in fairly close for you today so you can see the stuff that's going on. And I'm sorry if I apologize if the video is a little jumpy. We're recording and playing this at the same time. And now we're going to move over to the administration area, which has some offices in it, not a lot's going on. So administration deals primarily with the broad stroke running of the hospital. Their main item is the token panel. The other thing they really need to be doing is keeping this chat window open and watching the chat going on between the other departments. We are intended to be a multiplayer game, and we do depend completely on player communication. And that's something that needs to be taught in these situations anyways. People need to realize they have to talk to other people in order to get things done. So if admin sees no chat messages going between players, they need to start making players communicate. They also need to make things happen. If the emergency department is complaining for a lack of staff and nobody will give up staff, admin needs to step in and say, hey, you need to start giving up staff. But their token panel gives them their abilities. Their first and primary ability is to declare an incident, and then the other abilities rely around that. If you notice, they kind of are grayed out because they're not available yet. We have to declare an incident. And actually, if you look up at the top where it says stand up supply, right below that it says requires declare incident. So I can't activate that until an incident has been declared. And actually, here we go, news item coming across is breaking news. There's an explosion in a local mall. So we don't even know yet that there's radiation involved. We just know there was an explosion. So we're going to be preparing for casualties, so I'm going to go ahead and declare the event. Now, if you notice, these abilities all became available. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stand up triage. And if you immediately notice, this was that later gray color, and now it's a dark gray color. Excuse me. I'm sorry, dark blue color. And so it's available to me now. I'm also going to stand up decon. I'm going to open the Emergency Operations Center. I'm going to stand up the supply player and the labor manager. Now, if there were actually people playing those roles, they would actually have nothing to do until their role was activated. So generally, in some cases, we recommend some people play multiple roles. And I'm going to come over here to decon and triage. And triage has now been constructed. It has the 2 triage desks and the waiting mats, and decon is the tents are being inflated as we speak. Now, something to note also, the triage desks and the decon tents are, once they're constructed, are finished and available, but they're not manned, so we're actually going to have to transfer staff over to them. Because if you'll notice, patients are coming in and they're ignoring the triage desks completely, which is what they'll do. So that covers the admin role. So let's go ahead and move on to personnel. Personnel doesn't have a location in the world, so they don't really worry about it too much. We don't have a camera location for them. So I'm just going to come down, and personnel worries about the staff tab more than anything else. And if you notice, we have a lot of patients dying down here from all our alert messages. I should mention staffing for us operates on a ratio system. So we can set ratios within the scenarios to say you need at least 1 nurse for every 10 patients in non-critical care. So the AIs will try to play to that ratio. So if they see they have more staff than they need, they'll free up the staff for personnel to send somewhere else. Also, we have 4 staff types. We have doctors, nurses, technicians, and general. And we do understand that there's a lot of types of doctors and a lot of types of nurses and indeed a lot of types of technicians, but we felt it easier to give you a general troop type or a staff type than to try and delineate, because then our list and our user interface will become very clunky and hard to navigate, and we try to go for simple user interface wherever possible. So since I do know that I need staff for both triage and decon, I'm going to go ahead and actually select the nurses. And if you actually notice, we only show you the areas or departments in this case that that staff type can be allocated to. So doctors can only be sent to ED and med-surg, where nurses add triage and decon. So I'm going to unassign some nurses from the emergency department and assign them over to triage. Oops, there we go. And they actually do have to walk over to triage. They don't just magically appear in triage. And I also need to send some general staff over to triage as well. One more. So same things. If you notice what I did there, I used the minus button to subtract out of ED, and there's actually a -5 right here for the number I took. And then they went into the unassigned bin, and now I've actually made a +5 here into triage. And once I'm done there, I have to commit, and then we see the staff move over. Now those guys are going to go on their way. That pretty much covers the personnel role. The other thing we can do is we can request, which if we send out a request, we'll see an alert message come down that I'm requesting staff be freed up. And ED and med-surg, triage, and decon can request staff as well. Let's go and move on to supply. The supply department is worried about whether or not the emergency department and medical department are consuming more supplies than they're receiving, and they're worried about whether or not outside hospitals are requesting supplies, or whether or not they need supplies from other departments. I'm sorry, other hospitals. In this particular scenario, we have three types of supply. We have pharmaceuticals, we have ventilation, and we have general supplies, which is everything else. Our scenario system is set up to be as detailed or as general as you would like a scenario to be. So if you need to track a particular item, such as aspirin or some sort of antitoxin, and you need to put it in by name, our afflictions are made so that they look for a specific type up to a general type. So if it can't find the specific supply type, it then just moves up to a general supply type until it finds the type it needs, and then it consumes that type of supply. The green bar here represents the hospital's general stockpile. And then the 2 bars below it are the actual supplies allocated directly in the medical surgery department and the emergency department. You can also click these little radio buttons here, and it will show you a sparkline graph of the current consumption rate versus supply rate of that department. But you can't see both departments at the same time. Currently, we're not burning more than we can resupply, so it's not a big deal. Something to note here is this is not a live update. It is updated every so often. According to protocols, when you have to go out and check your supply levels and report in, it's about every 5 minutes somebody will go check your supply levels and then come back and say and update this bar for you. Basically, this is a staff item. And so when you look at it, you're not sure how old the data is. So what you can do is you can request an update. Somebody will immediately go look, and then you'll have an update in a few seconds. If you feel you're getting low, like our ventilation is getting pretty low, we can request supply. What that actually does is that sends a message over to the administration. And here we have ventilation is being requested by our hospital, GBMC. And I actually have the right as the administration player to either deny it or accept that they want supplies. So if I think the supply player is just trying to scrounge supplies from other hospitals and we really don't need them, I can deny his request outright. If I accept it, which in this case I will, my liaison officer will start calling other hospitals to see if he can get supply. And here we see it, administrators checking with other hospitals, but other hospitals were unable to give us ventilation, so they said no. And also it works the other way. When another hospital requests supply from us, the administration has the first right of refusal, and if they decide to send it down to supply, the supply officer can just go, no, I don't have enough of that, so you're going to have to, tell them no. Now let's move on to security. So notice right in this area what happens when I click on security. You're going to see two items show up. These two sheriff stars just showed up in the world. There's actually one down here as well, and they're all over the hospital actually. But what these are security checkpoints, and you can either scroll through them using these arrows, or you can actually directly select them in the world. And you'll see this blue mask show up. And what happens here is this is showing you the area of coverage for this particular security checkpoint. I'll move it a little bit more into view. And right now there's no security in the area because we see it's inactive. We'll toggle the security. It's now activated. We see a little guy show up right here. And we still have the security star right there. So what that basically means is people are going to be checked going through, and because security is active, is if there were any incidents in this area, they would be halted immediately. We do have a couple of injects. We have 3 actually. We have gunmen that will come in and hold an entire area hostage. We have vandals which will move through your hospital as rapidly as they can. They will move into a pharmacy, steal supplies, and then try to exit. If they're not stopped before they exit the hospital, you'll lose that amount of supply. And actually we see here that right here is our security guard, little guy in the orange vest. Second thing we can do is lock an area down. A padlock appears and these shields come over the doors. If we turn it off, people can come in. Once it's in lockdown, nobody leaves, nobody comes in unless they are hospital staff or patients being escorted or transported by hospital staff. I'm not so worried about the cafeteria, so I'm going to go ahead and toggle security off. We'll actually see the security guard walk away. But what security is doing more than anything is watching for problems. They're trying to keep the flow of the hospital moving, but they're also watching for problems. Oh, the final inject is actually the press. The press will come into your hospital with news crews and reporters, and they will actually hold staff members effectively hostage for a period of time. During that time, that staff member will not be doing his job. Security can prevent that from happening by shoveling them off. Administration can also issue press releases and hold press conferences to draw press off of the medical surgery and emergency areas. The unfortunate side effect of holding a press conference is press actually shows up to your hospital, where they will trickle in slowly over time normally because an event is happening. But if you hold a press release, a large group of them will show up. Next up, we're going to cover the medical surgery department. This is something where I referred to earlier where you are a department head and you're issuing orders. So your staff is actually critical in carrying out that orders. If you have too few staff, your orders will not be carried out rapidly. In addition, the automatic functions such as monitoring a patient's vitals will not be updated as often, or the supply levels, those won't be updated as often either. So having the right balance of just enough staff to do all the jobs is very critical, as it is in real life. So here we're in medical surgery. And again, we have the patients. We have some patients who have died while I've been talking. But we do have other patients that are available. You can also select patients directly from this list. You'll be taken to the patient. They'll be in the center of the screen, and they'll automatically be selected. This is our patient treatment and information window. It has 2 tabs, the information tab and the orders tab. I'll get to the orders tab in a second. This is the patient's core information, their name, their sex, their age, and their vitals. Their current condition, whether they're getting worse, getting better, or maintaining. If they have a serious problem, it shows up here, and if they're in a bed or not. Then we have their diagnosis. This patient was admitted automatically or was transferred to us from ED. Since the artificial intelligence is dealing with that, they've already been diagnosed. But if the patient had not been diagnosed, you can open this window to diagnose the patient. We currently have just under 200 afflictions, representing everything from cuts and bruises and minor abrasions all the way up to terminal cancer. And then, of course, we have all of the chemical, biological, explosive, radiological effects as well. Instead of having to make a player, again, trying to keep this as simple as possible, scroll through a huge list of afflictions, we decided that we want speed, we want efficiency, and doctors or medical personnel that are playing this are going to know something just by looking at the patient's vitals, what their reports are, everything else. They're going to be able to deduce what the player or what the patient has. And in our game, there are a horse is a horse. If it looks like, chemical poisoning, it is chemical poisoning. So we give you a selection of 10 items. And from that, we try to group as many as we can into what they should have, and then we can throw in some others if we think that if we run out of options or what have you. We just fill out the list, and then it's up to you to pick what they have. So if we want to, and patients can have multiple afflictions, I should mention that. So we can come in and we can turn on or off as many of them as we want. That is actually tracked. Correct and incorrect diagnoses are correct. You do not have to diagnose a patient, however, to treat them. If you want to treat every patient without diagnosing them, well, that's your choice. Since decontamination is open, we are given the option to decontaminate the patient. You must select what type of decontamination you want. A transporter will come down, take them up, and decon them. Triage is open, but it's not staffed completely yet. Even though we sent staff out there, we haven't assigned them, and I'll show you that when we get to triage. We would be able to triage tag them, not that we really need to since they've already been admitted. We can assign them to a bed. And if you hover on the beds, you can see how many are available. So we have 0 trauma beds available. We have no ICU beds available either. We have no negative pressures available. And we do have 26 normal clinical beds available. Up here are the patient reports. So this one currently was when the patient presented. This was their problem. They were just here for scheduled surgery for rhinoplasty. And they were sent for lab work. And the lab said they've ruled out any imbalance in blood chemistry, so they're good to go. And if we notice the patient's history, blood work lab has been administered, but nothing else has been done to the patient. The final item is we can transfer them. We can transfer them to general population, which is where they already are. We can transfer them to another hospital. We can release them and send them home. Or if they're dead, we can send them to the morgue. If you try to send a live patient to the morgue, you'll get a warning sound and a message saying you can't do that. So let's look at the orders window now. Again, we get that core information. It doesn't move or change. We have the active window, which are any treatments such as fluid, blood, drugs, or pharmaceuticals, ventilation, anything like that that's ongoing and has been done to the patient and is still being done to the patient. Then we have pending orders, which are things that have not been done yet. Again, that falls back on staff. The more staff you have, the more rapidly pending orders are carried out. We have 4 categories of treatments. We have equipment, which currently we have dressings and monitors. And if you remember, I said that staff walks around and monitors the patients at intervals. If you hook a monitor to a patient, their information up here is live and constant, so it's always accurate. It's not old. Then we have ventilation, which, since ventilation is important and the type of ventilation you give to a patient is also important, we have 4 types. We have suction masks, masks, cannulas, intubation, and then actual ventilators. For prescriptions, we have fluids, blood, pressors, respiratory meds, antibiotics, cardiac meds, pain meds, and sedatives, and anesthesia. Again, we could actually have a very specific drug in this list if we needed it for the scenario. Then we have ancillary items, which is everything else. So we have lab work and CT scans, doctor's exams, operating room. When you're sent to an operating room, we don't make you designate the surgery, though we could. And surgery also takes an indeterminate amount of time to represent potential complications or what have you. So a patient could go in, take the minimum or slightly less than the minimum amount of time, or occupy an operating room for hours. We also have x-ray. We can issue plans, which are what you give to the patient before they go home: drink plenty of fluids, call me if you get worse, kind of thing. We have MRIs, ultrasounds, emergency cardiac care, and then routine procedures, which is everything else. Now in this case, I actually know she needs to go to the operating room to have her nose job, and I left-clicked on operating room, and it wound up in the pending. Now we're just going to wait. Well, we're not going to wait, but a transporter would come around, take her to the OR. As long as an OR is open, she would be put into the OR. And that's pretty much it. The important thing to remember is that you are not doing this. You are just giving the plan, issuing a plan for the patient's treatment and care. So let's go ahead. That was the medical surgery department. The emergency department operates exactly the same way. So we're going to go to triage. And we see out in triage, there's still no patients because we actually, while we have staff, we haven't told them to do their job yet. So we're going to tell the nurses to man their desks. And then we're going to tell the general guys to get ready to be able to transport patients. So if you notice the unassigned again, I moved them over using the plus button, and then I committed that action. So if I did that and went away without pressing the commit button, nothing would have happened. Now that our desks are manned, we'll just wait for some patients to show up. Oh, here's a staff request actually from decontamination that they're actually requesting more technicians. So since we're playing everything really quick and we are waiting for patients to show up, I'm going to go ahead and fulfill their request and move some technicians over to decontamination. Oh, and we have patients. Now, if you remember the med-surg, I had this very large window open to deal with patients. Triage deals with quick response and thinking. So we actually have, oops, I need to switch back to triage. Sorry about that. We have a triage tag. So here we just have their name, what they're saying, their presentation story, and their core vital statistics. And then we have the triage tag itself where we can send them home, tag them green, yellow, red, or black. We also represent the number system if we need to. So here we have, and the clipboard in the center actually will open the full patient chart. So if you had time and it wasn't overly critical, you could actually diagnose the patient if you wanted to. Again, diagnosis is not required, but it does help with your statistics at the end. So we see that he thinks he's irradiated. I know he's walking well just because I've played this enough. And then once you have made a tag suggestion, you can also make a decontamination suggestion. So we will recommend radiation decontamination. And just we'll do a couple of, this one, he's got to see someone because he knows he's radiated. We'll make him happy and decontaminate him. Maybe then he'll just go home. This gentleman has thinks he's broken some ribs, so I'm going to classify him as yellow. I don't know if he was involved, but we'll go ahead and decontaminate him anyways. The decontamination player will be making choices based on my recommendations and whether or not they think they really should be decontaminated. And the one thing I haven't done, even though I have radiological patients coming into the hospital, is I've never had administration issue personal protection. And that actually will contaminate the hospital. And in a normal real-life situation, obviously what would happen there is the hospital would be shut down until it could be decontaminated, no one in or out. But we actually just put a tag into the timeline. I'll show you that later, because I'm sure by now my hospital has been contaminated. And during the after-action review, when everybody had gathered to talk about the scenario, they could actually say, well, here's where the hospital was contaminated, and that's pretty much where your scenario ended. This particular person was near the blast and saw everything, and they're afraid they're going to die. We will go ahead and tag them. So that's triage. So we've covered pretty much everything at this point. The only thing left is the instructor role, which I didn't quite mention. Actually, I'm going to scroll the map out here. Sometimes people walking under the windows, since they're a little translucent can cause issues in seeing things. The instructor has perfect knowledge. I could walk around the hospital and see everything that's going on and see all of the information available to the normal roles. Watch what they're doing, see how they're acting. In addition to having perfect knowledge, I also have 4 new user interface elements. And I can pause the game, I can end the game, and I can show a debug window, which just shows what's going on in the background. In the staff tab here, I can add or remove staff from the hospital. So if I thought they were having a really hard time and maybe they needed more nurses, I could commit to that. And I could give the labor pool, which goes over to the personnel manager, 10 new nurses. Maybe they decided they needed to go to work in the event of this casualty, and they showed some courage and showed up. There's also a volunteer desk under the administration ability panel, or the token panel, that allows them to set up a volunteer desk, and they will receive staff. Obviously, they'll receive a lot of general staff. They will receive very few doctors. So the second thing that the instructor can do is cause injects to happen instead of just having them randomly show up in the scenario. They can cause gunmen to spawn. They can cause vandals to spawn. Currently not accessible to them is they can actually cause press to spawn as well. And by spawn, I do mean appear and show up in the hospital and start causing problems. Now we have patients. Our patients are not set up as individuals. We don't have a, this many pregnant women are going to show up. What we do is we have categories of patients. So in this case, we have routine, routine 2, incident 5 through 8, incident 15. And these particular names mean the time of the scenario where a particular patient type is going to show up. So at 15 minutes into the scenario, this level of incident patient will start showing up. So within that is blast damage, particulate radiation damage, or afflictions, and blast patients or cut, bruised patients that have suffered radiation as well. Also within this is when ambulances are going to start showing up, and helicopters, with the more critical patients along these lines. And then the incident 5 to 8 mode is generally going to be your worried well, and the starting trickle of your critical patients who are actually at the incident site. Routine 1 and routine 2 appear throughout the entire scenario, and as the scenario designer, I know this, I should mention that. So these are just standard cuts, abrasions. I broke my arm falling off my roof. I cut my hand slicing open a bagel, things like that. So if I really thought the hospital was doing very well and I wanted to make the game a little bit harder for them, I could just add patients. And they don't just magically appear. On the next iteration or data check, these patients will be added to the queue to be brought in. Patients also show up along a curve. So just because you've said incident 15, so at 15 minutes in, I have said that 20 patients will show up over the next 5 minutes within this incident category. And finally, supplies. I can add or remove supplies just like I could anything else. So If I thought, well, they didn't have enough supplies at the start, I can give, and here I'm directly giving medical surge pharmaceuticals, not the general supply level. Excuse me. And that's pretty much the instructor's capabilities. So we've covered everything at a very high level. And there's far more to this than I've shown you. There's deeper levels. I haven't shown you the effects of every ability that administration have, and I haven't really tried to care for patients so you can see the full flow. Now we're going to go ahead and end the game, and I'm going to show you how our after action report is currently structured. And I do mean currently structured. So we go ahead and end, and we're going to go to our after action review. Our initial goal for this was to not track individual performance. We were supposed to track the hospital's performance. So we do not display data for individual roles, how administration did, how ED or MedSurg did on a patient-by-patient basis. We track the hospital. We do show some information about departmental items, but we don't exactly show why or how they failed. We show their success and survival rates of patients, which I'll show in a second. So it's very important to note that we do, however, track all of that data in the background. There's no reason we can't display it already. We just, under the initial instruction of Code Yellow, we were not required to, so we did not. Just going to start. So for triage tagging, I did a very poor job this time around. I got one incorrect out of the ones I tagged, and I got none correct. So we have a bar graph, and then we have actual numbers down here. Patient survival. This is by triage tag, and this is by correctly tagged patients, not what a player may have tagged them. So all of our green survived. 2 of our yellow triage patients did pass away, and 10 of our red. So we only lost 12 people, and 92 of our patients survived. So not bad. And this is by department now as patient mortality. So 6 of our patients died between ED and MedSurg, and 3 of our ED patients survived, and 41 of our MedSurg patients survived. To note that on transfer, what that means is patients that were transferred to other hospitals. You are not required to have a patient be stable before you transfer them, and they can die in transit. Also, things like phosgene poisoning, which has a secondary onset, you might release them because they look completely stable and normal and might only be having an asthma attack, so you send them home, phosgene kicks in again, and they pass away at home. You'll be graded there as well. And patient wait times. So we have an average triage wait and an average ED wait. Kind of like when you're in line at the grocery store or a fast food place. They'll give you an average. You can watch their stats on their monitors and see average wait times. Here we have a timeline. This would be full of events here. We only played 34 minutes out of the 60 minutes of the scenario. I should note that when you're creating a scenario, you define how long the scenario is. It does have a hard stop. There is not, this is where we stopped tracking. This particular scenario is 60 minutes long. At 60 minutes, we would have come to this screen, regardless of what we were doing. I just ended it early. And again, we are operating under a time compression, so that would have actually represented at about 1 shift of a hospital in time, somewhere between 8 and 12 hours. And then we have the points along here are picked out down here on the event timeline. So the incident was declared at 6 minutes, 28 seconds. And we do go out quite a bit on decimal places. So staff were contaminated, as I mentioned. Right here, the hospital would have had to have been shut down, and it would have been all over, but we kept going. We let you keep going. So technically, in the after-action review, this would have been the point where we said, really, you failed, but we let you keep going to see how you did anyways. And the instructors cannot, in the after-action review, they don't get to secretly get away with anything. We actually show when the instructors did things, so the players can actually know that they were kind of messed with. And then the game was ended at 34 minutes. And then the supplies, you can see that ED was all over the place. Med-Surg, because we weren't doing too much, was operating kind of on a straight line. So that pretty much wraps up our demo. Shortly after this, at the end, there will be a slide with my contact information. Feel free to contact me with any further questions you have. I'll be happy to answer them. Or if you'd like to schedule a personal demo or another demo time, please feel free to contact me about that and we can set something up. Thank you very much.